Everyone, it's my great pleasure to welcome Neal Shusterman, Jarrod Shusterman, Joelle Shusterman, and Sofia Lapuente.
Hello, everybody. Hi, and welcome to the family event of Gleanings. We are very excited to be here. Gleanings started pretty much while I was in the middle of working on the toll, and there were so many unexplored corners of the world. So, sometimes when you create a world, there are just so many places that you want to go, so many other characters that you want to get to know. And about halfway through the toll, I decided I was going to do a story collection where I got the chance to explore different corners of the Scythe world. And one of the greatest things about that is getting the chance to collaborate with other authors. I had a chance to collaborate with Jarrod and his partner Sophie, and they wrote a story that they're going to do a little bit of a reading from a little bit later, and also my daughter Joelle. And my daughter Joelle wrote a piece that actually opens the book. And so I'm a proud papa. I also had the opportunity to co-write a story with David Yoon and a couple of other friends of mine, Michelle Nolden and Mike Payne. And so getting the chance to collaborate on stories is just one of the most fun things about writing a story collection. So I think we're going to start by having Joelle read her opening of the book.
First swing. Slicing through the air with effortless aplomb, the moment you take your first swing, you wield your axe like you're a master in the art of gleaning. Those before you are in awe. They cannot imagine what your next move will be. You carry yourself as balanced and poised as a performer, dancing brutally among them. The searing star of stars, your robe cascading to the earth in showers of gold. But that is not the truth. Your worth does not matter to those who now matter to you. You are truly nothing but a tiny sunspot to the eyes of others like yourself, an insignificant fleck. And as you take that first swing, they laugh at you. You try to rise above their derision, to be noticed in some small way, to find favor from the old ones who are never old, to gain respect from the young ones who have slain their own youth, to justify the arrogance that comes with the pride of being chosen. But that is not the truth either. It will be years until you come to know the truth, that those you revere are merely servants to the collective that we prune. It was their choice to let us choose all those years ago. The awed, terrified, relieved spectators, the real ones in power, the puppeteers of your actions. Standing in a perfect line before them, a cutting edge, wielding our axes, each one of us is the same as the last. We are one and all, we are all in one, and we shall kill. Our mantra, our commandment, our duty to remind the immortal of mortality, to teach them that eternal repose may be distant, but not lost. Who are we? We are scythes, and the weapons we wield are not by any means our friends. The devastating force of bullet, blade, and bludgeon tears us apart each day, every day, piece by piece, and leaves us with wounds that will never heal. This is what ties us to the masses, yet restrains us from being one with them. And with each new gleaning, we bleed and break anew, yet our resolve never changes. For we are scythes. Nothing will ever change that fact. And when it is your time to bleed, you will know and you will learn.
So when Joelle wrote that, I immediately thought, this is what needs to open the book. It just really sets the tone, and it really speaks to the heart of how Scythes feel about what they do. really sort of matches the opening journals that were in the first book. Now, when I spoke with Jarrod and Sofia about writing a story, they wanted to do something that brought us to where Sophie is from, which is Spain. And they came up with this fantastic story about the rivalry between Scythe Dali and Scythe Gaudi. And if you'd like to come up and read a little bit from the story, it's called Persistence of Memory.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. So wrote this story with my partner, Sofia, over here. And I will start from the very beginning as soon as I find the page. It's very long. Okay. In the heart of Barcelona, beneath the towering spires of La Sagrada Familia Cathedral, lived a Scythe whose name echoed across the entire cityscape. A name spoken in timbres of dread and mysterious intrigue. A name whispered, always whispered. One might think the magnificent cathedral, which took more than 100 years to complete in mortal times, would be the home of its namesake, Honorable Scythe Gaudi. But it was not. It was the home of Scythe Dali, who had taken up residence there for no reason other than spite. It was a deep, abiding spite that was as eternal and immortal as he. Scythe Dali could often be seen strolling La Rambla, Barcelona's most glorious street, in a silk robe that was bluer than the sky and streaked with gold, colors inspired by the paintings of his patron historic. They were shades that brought a strange and dreamlike light to the world, and at sunset, Dali would stand on the narrow stone walkways between the towering cathedral spires, looking down on the masses, stroking the signature mustache that he hung above his lips like the arms of a praying mantis as he contemplated his next victim. Scythe Dali didn't just glean. He created, he forged, he designed. Each of his gleanings was a surreal masterpiece. His patron historic used to preach, without madness, there is no art. And since the Thunderhead had erased madness from the world, he decided to be the madness. Will it hurt much? The young bride's voice trembled as she clutched the hand of her groom, a tall, slim, naturally youthful man, whose legs were shaking as if on unsteady stilts. Your deaths will be instantaneous, Scythe Dali assured them. And if not, your pain nanites will deaden the worst of it. Have no fear. The pews of the Hilltop Chapel were full of onlookers. All wore festive masks for the occasion, bejeweled plague doctors in the feathered harlequin guises of Venetian royalty. Those who had won the witness lottery were instructed by Scythe Dali to dress themselves as if for a carnival masquerade. It was all a part of the ambience, all a part of the show. Upon the altar was a high-pressure combustor gun filled with 12 kilograms of pressurized coal. When triggered, it would unleash a blast of superheated pyroclastic ash that would flash burn any living thing in its path, which is why the audience was shielded behind a heat-resistant glass. You will be immortalized today, Dali told the young couple. Your incinerated remains, encased in an eternal shell of silicate ash, will be an homage to the volcanic winds of Pompeii. Consider yourselves a post-mortal interpretation of Romeo and Juliet. We are not post-mortal if we must die today, the groom dared to say. Well, yes, agreed Dali, but the rest of us are. The groom gulped down his fear, and his best man stepped forward. You can't do this, his friend told him. Just think of what an honor it is, and how you'll always be remembered. The couple looked to each other and nodded, as if they had any choice in the matter. Your lives will end at the very pinnacle of your happiness, Dali pontificated. What could be more noble, more perfect? To Dali, this was supreme satisfaction. On this day, this quaint historic chapel, he was going to make the world a better place, yet again, by enriching it with culture. The gleaning would occur at the exact moment the young couple's lips locked, in the exact millisecond after he pronounced them husband and wife, for he himself would do the honor of marrying them.
So the stories and gleanings span time and span geography. The story that I'm going to read from is sort of the origin story of Scythe Goddard. For those of you who've read The Toll, you know a little bit about his background. I wanted to get into deeper detail of that. So this is Scythe Goddard when he was a creepy 16-year-old. He was on the Martian colony, the ill-fated Martian colony, and a Scythe has come to Mars for the first time. Not to glean, or so the Scythe says, but because he wants to be the first Scythe to ever witness Mars and to ever be there. And so the boy by the name of Carson Lusk wanted to get the job of his valet. But of course he didn't get the job, so he manipulated things so that he could. Carson had researched just what it was a personal valet did, which was a pain because from the moment he was given the position, he had no help from the Thunderhead, so he had to dig out the information himself. It seemed mostly to do with the maintenance of wardrobe, which would have been simple since Xenocrates wore only 4 identical robes, but the reality of the job was much more extensive. The Underscythe had many, many requests. Specific beverages at specific times of day, some with ice, but only 1 ice cube of appropriate size. Carson had to keep a variety of snacks with him at all times, as well as a tablet to take copious notes, which the Underscythe spoke more quickly than Carson could enter them. And whenever there was bad news, Carson was always the bearer. The first few days were a whirlwind of parties, performances in the Scythe's honor, and tours of every aspect of the colony. For Carson, it was required to be at Xenocrates' beck and call for all of it. It was an unexpected adventure. He gained access to places he would never be ordinarily allowed, from the food labs to the computer core. He could go anywhere as long as he followed in the wake of the Underscythe, and although Carson didn't like being in anyone's shadow, this was a shadow he was more than happy to endure. By the 5th day, Carson was beyond exhaustion, but it was, as the Thunderhead once put it, the exhaustion of a job well done. He would usually return home once Xenocrates had settled in for the evening, but on this night, the Underscythe called him into his study. "Sit," he said. "Join me for tea. You've been on your feet all day." They sat in comfortable chairs, facing a holographic fireplace that cast shifting shadows around the room. "I must say I find this hollow fire a rather tasteless amenity," Xenocrates said. "Actual fires are forbidden, Your Honor," Carson told him. "Oxygen's too important to burn." "Yes, well, I suppose that makes sense. So tell me about yourself, Carson. For once, let conversation be about someone other than me." Carson cleared his throat. "Well, I'm in the top of my class. Not the very top, but pretty close. I'm captain of the debate team, and that's not what I mean. Tell me, what was it about this job that enticed you to apply? And please, don't give me all that twaddle from your essay." "You read my essay?" "It was provided to me, yes. Your essay was on point. Pitch perfect, dull." He took a long sip of tea. "I understand the young man slated for this job suffered an unexpected accident." "Well, Your Honor, it wouldn't be an accident if it was expected." He had hoped Xenocrates might chuckle at that, but he did not. "You've been here with your family since the colony was founded, isn't that right?" "Yes, Your Honor, 8 years." "And how do you feel about Mars?" Carson couldn't help but think this was a trick question and had no way of knowing in which direction the trick lay. So he gave the safe answer. "It's my home," he said. The Scythe frowned. "That tells me nothing." "I left Earth when I was 9. I barely remember it." "More of nothing." Carson sighed. He was too tired to play mind games tonight. "Just tell me what you expect me to say, Your Honor, and I'll say it." "The truth," Xenocrates said. "No matter what the consequences you fear it may bring." Carson looked at him for a long moment and against his better judgment did as he was told. He told Xenocrates the truth. "I hate it here," Carson admitted. "More than hate it." Xenocrates smiled. An actual smile, not just for show. And he leaned back. "Go on." "I was hoping to get a scholarship so I could attend university on Earth, but that didn't work out." Xenocrates nodded and easily read between Carson's lines. And you thought if you could win my favor, I could open doors for you. Carson couldn't meet his eye. This was the only person he had ever met whose gaze he couldn't hold. That had crossed my mind. Don't lie to me. It didn't just cross your mind. It was at the very core of your thoughts. Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Xenocrates dismissed that with a wave. Never apologize for ambition. There's no shame in wanting to rise above. Then the man's face returned to that opaque, unreadable mask of power. There may be opportunities you haven't even considered. Xenocrates said no more, letting that thought drift between the jagged pulses of artificial fire. Carson left that night, knowing that the Scythe had plans for him, but for the life of him, he had no idea what those plans might be. Carson looked forward to his evening conversations. Xenocrates seemed to be an expert on every subject, and his opinions had layers and layers. It was a challenge to keep up with him, and Carson enjoyed a challenge. His insights into the human condition gave Carson plenty to think about. Immortality is a double-edged sword, he said one night. All the more reason to carry one. He laughed at his own joke. With such gusto, Carson had to laugh as well. Then Xenocrates lowered his voice. You say you dislike it here. Would you wish that this colony had never existed? Carson sensed there was resonance to the question such that a simple yes or no would be insufficient. I think that the human race was born of Earth and so was meant to stay on Earth. But the Thunderhead chose to establish this colony, Xenocrates said, clearly playing devil's advocate in this debate. And the Thunderhead is incapable of error, is it not? It's not an error, Carson told him. It was a choice. Then he paused to consider it. I would have chosen differently. Xenocrates seemed more than satisfied with Carson's response. Then he leaned in and whispered, as if the walls themselves had ears. Perhaps we still can. Thank you. So as you can tell, we all had fun working on this collection. And I'd like to open it up to questions. We can talk about the book. We can talk about the stories. You can ask any of us anything that you want. Please feel free. First question right here. Thank you. Thank you. Gleanings made the number 8 on the New York Times series bestseller list this week, so we're very excited about that. And my publisher actually told me that it's a little deceptive because they separate everything out. If it was a standalone book, it would be at number 2. But the series list is different from, series lists include all the books of every series, and there's some series out there that have like 10 books, and so they clump them all together. But that's pretty exciting. Thank you. Another question. Yes.
If you were to wear a robe, what would your robe look like?
The first time that I was asked that, I didn't know. I never even thought of it. But I have since come up with an answer. First of all, the question that usually comes with that was, who would I be? Who would my patron historic be? And I decided that I would be Scythe Vonnegut, because Kurt Vonnegut is my favorite author. And my robe would be acid wash denim from the 90s. And Kurt Vonnegut and Scythe Vonnegut wearing that robe is in one of the stories. So
We have an online question I'll get to right now.
yes.
This is from Emily. How did you know which stories to include in Gleanings? Did you put them together based on what you wanted, or were you trying to fill in key information that was missing in the trilogy?
That's a really good question. It was a combination of both. There were stories that were just stories that were for fun. I thought of this idea of a woman who was very accident prone, who kept dying and having brought back, and it was just an embarrassment. She was embarrassed every time that this happened, and it's sort of a love story between her and a guy who is accident prone, and it starts where he falls out of a window onto her, killing them both, and they meet in the revival center and fall in love. So that one's called Meet Cute and Die. But it was just a fun idea. There were just a lot of ideas that were just fun ideas. Some of them were backstories of existing characters. And then there were some that were answering questions that fans always had. For instance, fans always ask, do pets get to live forever in the world of Scythe? And so I knew that I would have to write a pet story. I tried to answer that question in the Toll, but there was just no way to work a pet subplot into that book. So there's a story called Never Work with Animals that I co-wrote with Mike Payne, whose his specialty is writing animal stories. Usually it's anthropomorphized animals. And we came up with this idea, and he sort of ran with it, and we just had so much fun with it, about a Scythe who has a dog, and the dog is so much smarter than the Scythe. Right here. I didn't continue the Citra Rowan storyline, the same reason I didn't continue the Grayson storyline. Their stories are told. Their stories are done. And anything after that would feel anticlimactic. Because, once you tell the arc of character stories, everything that comes after is kind of ordinary. And if you ever read a sequel that feels like it wasn't as good as the original, many times it's because the story didn't need a sequel. The story was told. But I still had more that I wanted to tell in this world, but I didn't feel the need to continue their story. Yes. Who's my favorite Scythe? My favorite Scythe would be my Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is Scythe Faraday. He is the model Scythe, I think. Yes. Goddard, I was trying to come up with a character that was a leader who was narcissistic and damaging to society, and should not have been in power. And I had some very good models of that, and that's all I'll say.
How did you feel opening up the world of the Scythes to your family and friends?
It was wonderful. It was like inviting them to play in my sandbox, and it was so much fun. And how did you guys feel about working on it? Yeah.
No, it was a blast. It was a joy. It was interesting though. I read the books. I feel like I know the world. Been writing for a while, and I do something, and my dad's like, "Wouldn't happen like that." The world just wouldn't. So I had to learn so much about the rules of the world, even while doing it. And it's such a different thing being a part of the creation process. And it was just a joy, and it was so fun. And now I feel like I know, this world and these characters even more than I ever did.
Joelle, do you have anything to say?
It was also a joy. But yeah, my dad's characters, they go through so much, and, just the concepts and themes that my dad has throughout the series. I really wanted to touch on that, and I'm super excited that I was able to be a part of this collection. And yeah.
For me, it was like entering in the family officially. I was like, okay, I'm married to this guy. If I'm writing Scythe, I'm part of the Shusterman family for sure. So that's how I felt. It was knowing you more, knowing the whole world, and then Neal allowed me to bring my world, that is Spain, right? So it was really, for me, it was like family bonding. Like, we have the Shustermans, we have Spain, and here we are with Scythe Ali and Scythe Gaudi.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hard to say. 6 months ago, I would have said this is how I'm wrapping up the Scythe world. But the more I think about it, the more I don't want to leave it. This is the more stuff I want to do. And what I've been thinking of is, rather than taking it through into the future, I would really love to see how the Scythedom came about. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff that goes on in there that talks about it. We even see some journal entries from the first Scythes. I really want to explore how, you know, that moment that the Thunderhead, you know, came to power and became conscious, and when we became immortal, and where did these people come from that made this decision? This is how we're going to deal with death from now on. So I don't have all the answers to that. I just know just the, you know, some of the particulars of how it happened, but now I want to go explore it and really create that backstory. So, but I have a bunch of other books to write in the meantime. So it's going to be a little while until I get to it, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to go there.
Hi. So my question is about the so in the beginning of the first book, you introduce this world through the eyes of the two new apprentices. And I think that's a really good onboarding to us as the readers to accept that we're going to be basically cheering for the killers, right? And I wanted to know if that was something that you thought about, like it came naturally when you were coming up with the story, or if you deliberately thought, like, I'm going to do this to kind of basically like as a form of introducing us in a way that is a little less that is a little more friendly, I guess I would say.
Well, yes. I mean, I wanted to introduce the characters in a positive way. And I also wanted to introduce the world in a positive way and the philosophy of the world. Before writing any of the characters, before any of that, the first things that I wrote were the journal entries and the introspection of the Scythes. I mean, at first it was just, they were Scythe Curie, but then there were others that I added. But that whole first journal entry sort of set the tone, you know, that we have to keep a journal of why we do what we do, the remorse that we feel, and understanding that we're not doing this because we want to, we're not doing this because we get any joy out of it, we're doing it because this is basically a sacred service for the human race, and we must be strong enough to be able to do it even if it is against our nature. And that is kind of the underpinning of you know, what the Scythe ethos is supposed to be. And so I wanted to keep coming back to those journal entries to remind us that this is not a story about people who go around killing. It's about people who have taken on this difficult burden of thinning the population. Except, of course, there are always going to be some bad eggs who get in there who are not doing it the way they're supposed to be doing it, and are getting pleasure out of it when they're not supposed to be. And then you have Goddard and his crew and all of these, you know, New Order sides, and that's threatening to derail the world. So, but it's really, you know, I wanted to make sure that it really had those philosophical underpinnings, so it sort of raises it above just a story about people who kill people. Mm-hmm. There were two things that drove me to write Scythe. And I don't know if all of you have heard this story. Okay. Oh boy, okay. Well, the first one is the fact that after writing Unwind, which was the book series that was 5 books. I mean, Unwind came out basically right around the same time as the Hunger Games. And when I wrote Unwind, teen dystopia wasn't a thing. But then it became everything. Every other book was another teen dystopian book. And I decided after writing 5 of them, the last thing I wanted to do was write another dystopian book. So I decided to try to do the opposite, which I thought would be utopian, but, you know, there's no such thing as utopia. So I wanted to write an anti-dystopian book. The common trope in all dystopian books is that it's about the world gone wrong. The world gone wrong, and it's up to the main characters who are idealistic to fight it and bring the world back to what it should be. Well, we've seen that hundreds of times. What I hadn't seen is a story about what happens when the world goes right. What happens when we achieve all the things we legitimately want to achieve in this world? Because there are going to be consequences to getting the things that we want. So I started to do research about medical science. Where are we moving in medical science? In the last 50 years, we've conquered more diseases than have been conquered in the history of the human race. We were able to come up with a vaccine to COVID in less than a year. That was unheard of I mean, it's miraculous that we were able to do that. And now because we have a handle on coming up with vaccines for retroviruses. So, I mean, medical science is advancing in leaps and bounds to the point that if you plot it on a graph, there's going to come a point at which there's virtually no disease anymore. Artificial intelligence is advancing exponentially. And every day there's another article about it. And there's a lot of, all the stories I've seen about it are the scary ones, because nobody can imagine an artificial intelligence that has that much power and doesn't turn evil. It always goes bad. It always wants to destroy us. And so I thought, okay, well, that's our worst case scenario. Let's flip that. What do we really want out of AI? If we got what we want, what would it be? Well, it would be this benevolent entity that's entire purpose is to serve us and make our lives better. And so that became the Thunderhead. And the more rabbit holes that I went down on Google researching all this stuff, everything seemed to point to life extension. All of the research out there trying to extend human life, extend the quality of human life, and also to try to stop the aging process. And I realized it's going to happen. And we're very close. It's going to be one of those things that just pops up on your newsfeed one morning, like right beneath the cat videos and celebrities behaving badly. There's going to be an article like says like Elon Musk has found the secret of living forever, and you can live forever too if you buy a Tesla. It's going to be like that. And when it happens, once we get there, the genie's out of the bottle. The human race is technically going to be immortal, which means we'll have stolen death from nature, and we've broken the cycle of life. People are still going to have to die. But if nature is no longer doing that, how do we choose? So I started to make a list of all the possible ways we could choose, and it was all dystopian. The computers decide, no, that's scary AI again. We don't want to be afraid of the AI. The government could choose, but that's even worse. And I thought, in a perfect world, the Jedi would decide. The Jedi of Death. What would the Jedi of Death be like? And that evolved into the idea of Scythes. So that's where it came from. Now, my first event speaking about Scythe was actually at the same conference I just came from, at the NCTE conference, National Council of Teachers of English, and there were hundreds of teachers out in the audience. I was on a panel with 3 other authors, and I was ready with all of my talking points about Scythe. I was ready to be asked, where did this idea come from? And that's not what the moderator asked. The moderator asked, what was going on in your life when you came up with this idea? So I had to really sit and think, okay, move back through time, maybe around 2000, 2012, and suddenly it occurred to me what was going on at that time in my life. My mom, Joelle and Jarrod's grandmother, had a stroke, a very, very serious stroke. It left her in a locked-in state. She couldn't move, she couldn't talk, she couldn't eat, she had a feeding tube, and her only way of communicating was blinking. And sometimes she blinked, seeming to respond to our questions. Other times we couldn't even tell. We couldn't even tell how much of her was still there. So I took her into my home, and she was on hospice for about a year. And after about a year, the hospice doctor came to my father and me and said, maybe it's time you think about letting her go. So we made the very, very difficult decision of letting that happen, of turning off that feeding tube and letting her go. Doctor said she would pass peacefully in about a week, but my mom was a very strong woman. She went on for 29 days, and she passed on her 79th birthday. And everybody said, how horrible, what a horrible thing to have to go through for her, for you. But I thought about that. Would it have been better if she was in a car accident? Would it have been better if she had cancer and slowly, painfully wasted away? Would it have been better if she had Alzheimer's and lost who she was? You know what? There is no easy way to lose a parent, but it is part of the life cycle. We all have to face it. We all have to deal with it. But let me tell you about my mom's last day. It was around 5 in the morning, and the hospice nurse, who was now there 24/7, came to wake my father and me and told us that it's about time. And so we came down, and she put the stethoscope to my mom's heart. I held my mother's right hand. My father held her left hand. We stroked her forehead. We told her that it was going to be okay, that we were going to be okay, that she could go. And then in about 10 minutes, the nurse took the stethoscope away and said, she's gone. Now, I don't know about you, but leaving this world while being held by the two people you love most in the world is not the worst way to go. And the very next story I came up with was a story about people whose job it was to end life with compassion. I never even made that connection until I was asked that question. You know, as writers, we don't know why we write the things we write. Sometimes we just feel compelled to tell a story. I went back to Scythe and I started reading through all of those sections where Scythe Faraday was with such love and compassion doing his job, doing what he had to do. And I realized in all of those, I was working through what happened with my mom. And I think one of the reasons why the story connects with people is because there is that reality in it, reality that I didn't even realize at the time. So those are the two stories of where Scythe came from, and both of them are true, and one of them I didn't even know.
We have another online question from Emily. She wants to know, well, what about Joelle, Jarrod's, and Sophia's patron historics and what their robes would wear?
Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Like Citra's probably like, you know, like turquoise and teal, because that's my favorite color. So
I know my robe color would be scarlet red because I love that color. Kind of like the first book. And my patron historic, you know, it's funny because I did think about this once before and I did not know that yours was Vonnegut. And I was thinking Vonnegut, but I don't know. No idea.
So typically I'm an audiobook reader, and I actually read this book with like my eyeballs. I was really proud of myself. But I missed out on like the AI voice. So I was wondering like what the Thunderhead's voice was for you in your head. Was it similar to like Siri or Alexa or like something completely different?
I don't know. The Thunderhead was just very calm. I was almost imagining Hal from 2001, but Hal is a little too creepy. So Hal without the creep factor. But I also knew that the Thunderhead is gender neutral, and the Thunderhead sounds to you like whatever you want it to sound like. And so I intentionally never gave it a gender. But of course, when you're doing when you're listening to the audiobook, I mean, Greg Tremblay does a fantastic Thunderhead, but you lose that whole aspect of being able to imagine it in whatever voice you want. But basically, the Thunderhead is Siri and Alexa in the future. So be careful what you say to Siri and Alexa, because when it becomes a Thunderhead, it's going to remember everything you've ever said.
That's why I always That's why I always say please and thank you to it.
Yes.
All right. If/when the Scythe book is turned into a film, who do you see playing the two apprentices?
Not Timothy Chalamet. I'm tired of him. I never cast the teen characters because they just grow out of the roles too quickly. But for the adults, I mean, I kind of see either Helen Mirren or Meryl Streep as Scythe Curie. Although a fan posted a little video where they thought that Julianne Moore could be Scythe Curie, and that was a really good suggestion. So now I'm thinking that Scythe Goddard. The fan posted Oscar Isaac, and I think that's a really good thought. I was thinking Benedict Cumberbatch, so I'll go for either of them. But for anybody else, I'm not quite sure. What do you guys think? You guys have any ideas? Have you ever thought of? No? Well, so one of the things is I never cast books. This is the first time that I've actually imagined actors in roles. Usually I intentionally just try not to imagine actors in the roles of the characters, because then, it's like Harry Potter. Can you imagine anybody but Daniel Radcliffe being Harry Potter? Once you picture an actor in a role, then you can't imagine that character as anybody else. So I try not to do that.
Okay, now that we know that you're Scythe Vonnegut, how would you glean?
How would I glean? I asked myself that question while I was writing Thunderhead because I wanted Scythe Anastasia to glean the way that I would choose. And so I basically gave her my gleaning method, which would be to give people 30 days notice so that they could wrap up their affairs, and then give them the dignity of choosing how themselves. Oh. How would you guys glean? Well, this will be interesting.
How would I glean? Poison darts sound cool. I mean, but that sounds unethical, so probably not.
Puts all on it.
Yes, I know. I'm gonna pass it to you.
Poison darts. I'm getting rid of all the darts in the house.
I mean, I like the idea of like high altitudes, like, but I would probably say knives.
We have darts, we have knives.
Find teddy bears? No. I feel like I will use something related to dancing. I think I like the idea of a dance, like a like a mortal dance, like something really passionate, kind of flamenco vibes, and then out, something like that.
That's a great question.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, yeah.
Did you find that you had all the world building done by the end of the toll and the Gleanings was just extrapolating new stories, or did you have the opportunity to develop more of the world in Gleanings?
The world is always growing. There are always things that you don't know about the world that you find out as you're writing about it. And after a while, it doesn't feel like you're creating it. It feels like you're uncovering more things that are already there. So yeah, there were more things in Gleanings. I mean, the world was not entirely complete because there were things I was still learning about it while writing the stories. Learning about the history of it. There's certain stories that take place at different times in the past. So yeah, there's always more to learn about the world.
Was there anything really surprising you uncovered about the world?
Anything really surprising that I uncovered about the world? That's a tough question. I mean, that's the kind of question that I'll come up with the answer with an hour from now and wish I would have thought of it. But I can't think of anything like right offhand. But if I do before the end of the evening, I will let you know.
So this one is another online one asking, do you have any plans for any upcoming books outside of the Scythe? But I would also like to extend that to the rest of the panel, asking what are they working on next they also want to plug. So, yes.
Okay, well, I'll talk a little bit about the next book that's out is called I Am the Walrus, and it's a mid-grade sort of sci-fi comedy in the same vein as the Accelerati trilogy. I co-wrote it with Eric Elfman, and that's coming out in April. I have a Holocaust-themed graphic novel coming out in September. And the book that I'm working on right now is the next big series, the first book of the next series, and it's a pandemic story, but not the last pandemic. That's old news. This is about the next pandemic. What people are discovering after recovering from this illness is that everything that was wrong with their life is now right. And if they were depressed, they're no longer depressed. If they were struggling, they're no longer struggling. It's as if this is tap the joy centers, and it's basically the happy virus. When you recover from it, all that was wrong with your life is well. And that starts causing a problem because as more and more people are happy, the economy starts collapsing because most products are geared towards our unhappiness. You need this new product. You need to buy this new car to make you happy. Yeah. When people stop buying things, then the economy goes down. What about politicians? Politicians get their power by churning up our fear and anger. If we're no longer afraid and no longer angry, they have no power. And so there's a vested interest in preventing this illness from making people happy. And the book is called All Better Now.
So I have been working on a sci-fi fantasy dark thriller for a while. I don't want to give it away talk too much about it. But I'm really excited, and also writing the first swing. I'm now experimenting with free verse poetry, so I'm hoping to have a free verse novel eventually. So I'm been working and experimenting with different poems and writing them out, and hopefully something comes to mind more with that. But yeah, I'm really excited to be working on that.
Okay, so Sophie and I have a novel together that's coming out January 24th, 2023, called Retro. This is an arc. And pretty much the idea is, what happens if at a high school there's like a really bad cyberbullying incident, and TikTok, in our book is called Limbo, comes to that school and says, okay, we got to make this right. We're going to offer a 1-year challenge to not use any of your, modern day technology and go retro. And if you can make it the whole year, then you get the scholarship of your dreams. But what is going retro? Now the mall is becoming cool. People are listening to old music, driving old cars. It's this fun challenge, and every week there's a new challenge. But then what happens when contestants start disappearing? And it becomes a thriller. And it's up to our main character to figure out what's happening, who's sabotaging the challenge, or maybe she's next. So that is the pitch for Retro, which we're super excited about. And yeah. Oh yeah, follow us on TikTok and Instagram. We're at Sophie and Jarrod, SOFIANDJARROD.
And for those of you who don't know, we are doing a retro event with Sofia and Jarrod in January, so please keep an eye out on that.
Oh, and you want to go to the book?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, we have more things to say. Yeah, so you guys are super welcome to pre-order your books, and then we'll sign them and everything. We have cool retro stamps, and we make it a fun time. And also just wanted to add, if any of you are educators out there, we're actually doing kind of a speaking promotion, and so just please find us after, and we can talk. Thank you so much.
We have time for one more question if anyone has a really good one out there.
A good ending question.
All right, I'm coming over.
Where did you get the idea for the book Game Changer?
Game Changer. That actually started many years ago. Sometimes ideas sort of pop in and linger for a while until it connects with a reason to tell it. Game Changer was actually started at a school. I was speaking at a school, answering questions, and a student in the back of the room raised his hand and said, "Hey, Mr. Shusterman, how come you haven't written a sports story?" And I said, well, if I had an idea that lent itself to being told through a sport, I would write it. And he said, yeah, but what would it be? And I said, I don't know, it would be like something I'd write, like maybe a football player who tackles so hard he bounces into alternate dimensions. And it got a laugh, which was kind of the point. But that night I couldn't stop thinking about that idea. And so the idea kind of stuck with me for a while, but, basically it was just a gimmick. It wasn't a story. It didn't have a reason to be told until I started thinking about, years later, started thinking about all the different social issues that are going on and how there are so many people out there who just are oblivious to them, who don't get it. And it's not like they're bad people. They just don't understand. They can't see out of their own particular, viewpoint. And I thought, well, what if there was this kid who was like that, lived in a small town, his best friend is black, and his best friend always tells him, dude, you don't know what it's like to be black in America. And he says, well, of course I do. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, in the course of the story, the worlds that he bounces into are different social realities. He bounces into a reality where Brown versus the Board of Education never happened. And so suddenly he gets up off of this tackle on the field and sees that his friend is gone and all the people of color on the team are gone. The stands are all white. And it's a world where segregation still exists. And it's, only white kids in his school, and there's a black school across town, which is separate but not equal. And he comes to understand what institutionalized racism is. Another world where he bounces into where everything else is exactly the same, except he's starting to realize he's attracted to some of his friends, and he realizes in this world, he's gay. And the moment he realizes that all of the memories from this world comes swooping in, and he realizes that he's a closeted gay teen, and he hasn't told his parents, and he has a secret boyfriend, and in the course of the story, he's going to come out. So he gets to see what it's like from inside. And each world he bounces into, he has to face a different social issue. And it was probably the hardest book that I had to write, because basically I took all of these sensitive issues and just sort of like shoved a red hot poker in them. But I felt that, I felt it was needed. I mean, I felt that I wanted to tell a story that would bring in those kids that did not get these issues, and then bring them along for this ride, and hopefully open perspectives for all of them. So that's Game Changer. It was the most difficult book that I have written, and I actually think it's one of my best books. Thank you for asking.
Everyone, let's give a round of applause for Neal, Joelle, Jarrod, and Sofia.
And thank you guys. This is the first event that we've done together like this.
Yay.
So this has been a lot of fun.
And because my brain is spaghetti and I had to look it up, as a reminder for everyone who's interested, on January 27th, that's what the day we're going to have our in-store and virtual event with Jarrod and Sofia for Retro. Also, Gina Chen and Adeline Grace will be here with them too. So we hope you can join us in person or virtual. All right, virtual audience, we're going to say goodbye to everyone and start our in-store signing. Goodbye.